When you open the Gospel of Mark, you won't find a manger, you won't find a family tree stretching back to Abraham, or a long philosophical prologue easing you into the story. Instead, you are thrown straight into the desert. This is the shortest of the four Gospels. The author wrote it in rough, unpolished Greek, and he wasn't even an eyewitness to the events he describes. By modern publishing standards, an editor would likely reject this manuscript. It reads like a bare-bones, incomplete first draft, missing all the standard expositional padding. But these omissions are deliberate. Mark strips away the background details because he wants to force a direct, immediate confrontation between you and the actions of Jesus. This chart shows the frequency of a specific Greek word across the New Testament. The word is euthys, which translates to immediately. Mark uses it 42 times, matching the rest of the New Testament combined. He keeps this frantic pace by grouping events topically rather than chronologically. Healings cluster together, followed by controversy stories and a dense block of parables. To understand this urgency, we have to look at the author. John Mark is essentially writing down the unpolished memories of the Apostle Peter, and he is translating these accounts for Roman Christians who are facing physical persecution and execution under the empire. For the entire first half of the text, this momentum drives toward a single question as Jesus demonstrates authority over disease, nature, and demons. Who is this man? The hyperactive pacing is a theological statement. Mark is showing a kingdom that is breaking into the world with irresistible force, led by a king who is constantly on the move. Halfway through the text, the breakneck momentum comes to a dead stop at the ancient ruins of Caesarea Philippi. Jesus finally asks his disciples the question the narrative has been building toward: "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answers, "You are the Christ." It is the correct answer, but Peter completely misunderstands what it actually means. Like almost every first-century Jew living under Roman occupation, Peter expected the Messiah to be a conquering king, a military leader who would overthrow their oppressors by force and restore Israel's borders. This expectation explains a recurring anomaly in the text, known by scholars as the Messianic Secret. Throughout the Gospel, Jesus explicitly silences the demons and people who correctly identify his divinity. The title of Messiah was too dangerous to claim publicly. If people believed he was a political conqueror, it would trigger a violent revolt. The title had to be kept secret until the crucifixion could permanently redefine it, from a military victor to a suffering servant. This diagram shows the structural cycle that drives the second half of Mark's Gospel. It loops 3 times. First, Jesus predicts his own death. Second, the disciples respond with pride. And third, Jesus patiently redirects them to the cross. After the first prediction, Peter actually pulls Jesus aside to rebuke him. After the second prediction, the disciples argue among themselves about which of them is the greatest. They are expecting a coronation, not an execution. Mark's uniquely negative portrayal of the disciples likely comes directly from Peter himself. Peter offers his own personal failures as a warning to future believers about the danger of seeking power instead of submission. Mark uses these failures to synthesize 3 distinct Old Testament roles into one figure. Jesus is the Son of God, he is the promised Davidic king, and he is the suffering servant from Isaiah's prophecies. The paradox of Mark is that true divine power is recognized through sacrifice, not conquest. In the entire Gospel, the first human being to finally confess Jesus as the Son of God is the Roman centurion watching him die on the cross. Everything in the narrative builds toward and flows from a single sentence in chapter 10, verse 45. Jesus states that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He introduces what theologians call the already but not yet framework of the kingdom of God. It is a spiritual reality, not a military revolution. The kingdom is already active in the present through Jesus' authority over demons and disease, but it is still awaiting a future consummation when the king returns. For the original Roman audience facing daily persecution, this framework provided desperate hope. It validated their current suffering by assuring them that their king also chose the cross before the crown. The morning after the Sabbath, the women arrive to anoint the body, but find the stone rolled away and the tomb completely empty. A young man in white tells them Jesus has risen. But instead of rejoicing, Mark chapter 16, verse 8 says the women fled from the tomb in terror and astonishment, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid, and the original text stops right there. While later scribes attempted to attach more satisfying, wrapped-up endings with resurrection appearances, the earliest and most reliable manuscripts end on that exact note of fear and silence. This abrupt cut to black is not a mistake. Mark deprives his readers of a triumphant conclusion so that the weight of the story lands squarely on them. The Gospel of Mark is a deliberate provocation. It leaves the empty tomb as a final, unresolved question. The Messiah who was crucified is alive. Now what will you do with that?